the stages for the most part, as it provides more places to explore and makes the stages feel more deep. The one thing I don't like about them, however, is how they interact with one another. Once you enter into each of these locations, there's no way out, which means you can get into a situation where you've collected all of the points in both of these places and are just short of hitting 100. On top of that, going into the pyramid is required for the star and shipping sand. Despite the total coin count for these two being pretty solid, 136 well, there just simply aren't enough. So the player has to guess how many coins they need for entering, which is just a horrible design choice. But the player is even short one coin, then that's it for them. They'll fall to their own. While it is possible to lock yourself out of the 100 or other stages, that's always because of players' actions and on.
今日も冒険頑張るのだ。
That's wrong, and not only here to start, we have to waste your time like star dares. Dive within the volcano pyramid, just respawn there This seems like a massive oversight, which forces me to put these quite low on the list. Had the pyramid and volcano been given exits, these two would have been significantly higher. In fact, I think the lava land could have made the top 3, because riding around on the shell on top of the lava is not fun. As it is now, though, this design choice is just simply too much. This shifting sandland will be giving 15, then leave the lava land is unfortunately going to be 13. Now that we're done with the 3 that have severe design oversight out of the way, let's get into some of the more competent. Jolly Roger Bay is the stage with the lowest coin count in the game, being 100. That means if you miss even a single blue coin, you have to reset the level. Luckily, the blue coins here are pretty easy to collect, and thus getting locked out at the start is much harder. Now you may be wondering why this would be placed above Diagram Knox despite this point count being. Well, for one, there's no way you can just keep up. On top of that, the points are not placed in any of the spots, so you'll be able to find them all relatively easily in person.
何しどうするのぞ。銭を貯めたらまた来るのだぞ。
Well, this is better though. It doesn't make up for being a water stage, and it's incredibly good. This is still at least a somewhat competent star though, so I have to give it.
おお、何を売るのぞ。
A miracle that Rainbow Ride's 100-point star is.
新製品がラインナップ。
This is
どう
being
す
an
るの
annoying
ぞ。
star on an annoying stage, but there are actually some positive qualities. It has the highest amount of points we've seen so far. Stage. Don't think from the entire stage. Additionally, that means you can actually list all of the stages playing still.
家事をするんじゃな。
That switch on the stage is probably the hardest in the game, requiring Mario to wall jump up to one. Like Mario 64 at all, I'm sure I don't have to explain to you why wall jumping is kind of. The reward is certainly worth it because
家事をするんじゃ。どうするのじゃ。
and that's a talent speed star. Personally, I'm actually a really big fan of how that plays in the game, and how all of them are it's difficult to get.
何を売るのじゃ。
Showing enough points in the stage to let them be. The coin switches are just too easy and don't really feel rewarding to get. It just seems sort of lazy. This one was actually thought out quite well though. Fortunately, this had to be tied to one of the worst stages of the game. Now how I talk about waiting well, in order to get the 100-point star, you still have to wait on several Parker rides where you don't need anything to understand. This makes the star overall very boring to get. If it wasn't for the really smart coin switch, it would have been below the lunch choice. Still, it's sort of hard to justify the basically auto
そろ
scroll
そろ
stage
来ると思ってたぞ。どこにしまったかな。
Peacock Block is probably the most linear main stage in the game. It really is one way to go this time. Personally, I don't really find this to be much of a bad thing. In fact, I quite like the stage itself. This one platform. But there are 128 total points here, which is certainly a good trend, especially since most of them will be unemployment points. Also, our first stage is to have blocks with 10 coins in it. It's not really important, but I always enjoy collecting lots of blocks. This is what I would say is the hardest start of the game, just due to it taking place in what I think is the hardest stage. I personally enjoy the challenge a lot, but there is one huge thing that brings this down. While this technically can happen on any stage, TikTok Block is the by far most notable. That being much like the 2-star scene in Shifting Sandland and the Lava Land, this punishes the player for noticing. On top of that, invisible walls to the stage are especially awful. Since this stage is all about being a vertical climb, you're either going to fall a significant distance if you hit one of these, or you're going to fall all the way into the void. Invisible walls are just prevalent for After getting footage from this video, I got hit by them several times. With every restart, I felt like I had to put this down lower. Clarify, I don't have anything against an actual star. In fact, I really enjoy challenges, but making the player lose all of their progress to a finish and one of the hardest stars in the game is just a... Luckily, no one even required. Take it off the bot. I don't know sure, but I believe that the version fixes it. So in that game, I probably rank the star higher. Instead of raising score ranking, it's one thing. Here on, there aren't really any glaring problems with the stars. My critiques are going to start becoming more nitpicky as I try to separate these from each other. I decided to choose KT Base Game as my first one of these significantly better stars. There are 139 points on the stage, giving plenty of wiggle room to go pretty much anywhere you like. This stage is big and confusing as KT Base Game, but I'm very thankful that you don't have to go through the entire game. After that, what becomes higher is like to not have to rivals. So with that said, why is this low? Well, I'm just simply not a huge fan of KT Base Game. All of these years later, it's still pretty tedious to navigate, which is of course by design, but it does make the 100-point star particularly solid. On top of that, there are several times where you have to ride elevators, which is quite slow and annoying to get looked at. Ultimately, you can just avoid these elevators, but for first-time playthroughs, you're likely to be riding up on it. The final thing, the chance a player may start half level star in a data set, and creating a set of I don't think this is as bad as Volcano Pyramid because this isn't entirely different level, and thus it's obviously not a star. It's something that can be frustrating. Overall, though, there really aren't that many problems with this stage playing, so making this pretty common. Unlike the last stage, I've always been a fan of wet driving. Something about it is just so eerie and weird that it makes it stick out as probably the most unique stage in this game. Definitely influenced my placing a little bit, however there are a few flaws that I think. Before we get into that though, the stage is a solid 100 points, meaning it's pretty hard to run out of that. There are even enough points so that you don't even have to go into the town area, which is nice for exploring the main stage. There are also several 10-foot blocks in the game that before I just really like. Wet Triangle's water shifting ability also makes the stage much more enjoyable than it since you don't have to swim. So, what are the flaws? Well, like a few stages we mentioned before, this is not that's the one where you can actually escape it. Water level is too low, and that might be pointless. I'm not sure what they could have done here. Some way out would have done this. Aside from that, a lot of the points here are from just a few. Yeah, I would have liked them all to be placed in that one. Maybe they could have all been placed on different levels of the stage, or maybe they could have been placed in the arrow lifts that no one uses. Just something a bit more. Besides that, though, this is a pretty fun song. More onto the stage for by far largest amount of coins, being technically rather whopping 191. This is of course due to the stage having both a large and small variants, on top of the big enemies giving you up to 5 each. I say up to because interestingly, jumping on them normally only gives you a single point, whereas ground pounding on them gives you. Personally, I'm a bit mixed on that concept. I do like that this rewards the player for trying something new, however, I don't like that hitting the enemies with ground pounds can be annoying. Just jump into Mario with the same like this. Ground pound, but the best way to hit these guys is by ground pounding them when you are even above them, so really the hitbox is flat. Luckily though, since there are so many coins, missing a few of these guys is I do enjoy riding around the stage and collecting in the shell, however, the first of the stage, normally I always found it being a bit tedious. The huge version just feels too big and spread out, but the tiny version as well feels too cramped, so there really isn't. You still find this to be better than the others we've mentioned so far, just due to how many options you have, but the general stage traversal just prevents this from being much higher. On top of that, you can't escape the Wiggler's area once you enter it, but you really have to be trying to get stuck to have that happen, so it's not really a big deal. Total amount of coins are, in general, pretty much collect. There are 135 total, and most of them are found in the stage slide, which is definitely the hardest. These are also you just slow down to get them all, as they're still quite easy to miss. I personally really like the challenge of the star, but the main thing holding this back is the side, it's really not that fun to traverse. The way all of the paths split off from each other, it makes it pretty tedious to run back and forth up them. Now, sliding is a ton of fun though, and definitely carries the star, but the mountain does keep us from top 5. Also, I do think sliding will actually like be number. However, if you spawn the 100 point star, you're about this instance you're on the slider.
気をつけていくんだぞ。
This is another pretty
お主と何を売るのぞ。
considering a lot of players will be
鳥新製品が何を売るの。さてさて。
the good reason it's just
毎度あり。じゃ
おや、君たち。
The first stage of the game
それ
will
じゃ
involve
聞かせてくれる？
the
おや、
course is a pretty
君
solid.
たち。
Let's get the good parts out of the way. Traversing and exploring the stage is very fun. Pretty much at the people areas with serenity points, getting the exploration to find these coins is very fun. Total of 146 coins, there are plenty to spare when using this open several graphics. The point count is to 5 things to explore the entire stage pretty much new. It's also no it likes and make the stars play.
強くなりました。
First is the fact that 25 of the coins in the stage are tiny rare. While I don't have anything against this concept, there is nothing in the stage that can remotely apply to me. There is a hint later on, that being in tiny dialogue.
それじゃ、頼んだよ。
already did among that.
あ、また。
The second unfortunate thing is the
なん
star
だっ
requires
け。
There's 99 coins on the ground level stage. Have to easily shoot out of the can from the stage. While I do like the stars being used to explore, I think it's just a bit too much out of the way. It's not a huge problem, but it's just a minor one, which is why this is going to be hitting. Goose Haunt is probably the most unique one here, as I personally find this stage of 100 points to be more about hunting down and killing all of the enemies in the game.
決まったら。
Total, but
緊張するぞ。
especially because of every enemy's scuttlebutt drop.
みんな頑張れよ。
Actually, really enjoyed the unique take on the start that this stage had. The height mount as well, you can entirely ignore going down to the basement and move on, which is definitely the worst part of this level. There's a ton of points down there, so it wouldn't be worth it, but you have the choice. Hey, what's keeping this from being at the top is the fact that Big Boost Mon's exterior is really barren, and that's on full display. There's really only a tox box and a few scuttlebugs and it's a super small amount of how much space there is. On top of that, the point switch is once again hardly failed. We're up 3 to 2. So what if they instead moved the blue point switch to the outside and defensive switch? Something more interesting than that. As it is now, the outside is just really boring to explore with almost nothing going. Exactly that, this mission is a lot of fun, to explore every corner of this area. I think it's time we look at our top. Before making this video, I was absolutely not expecting the star in Snowman's Land to be so high on the list. But to be honest, there really aren't many places. There's a Shell and surprise, it's fun to
残り1体です。
Snakes laid out in the wind, reversal with the shell, very fun. On top of that, the points of the igloo, while nothing crazy, are certainly nice to have about. This is also a sub-area that you can actually leave on, facing the problem that following example. If I have to give it a flaw, I'd say there's just too many points bunched up together in this one wall of the game, spreading them out. You know, that's not a good thing. The only weakness from being higher is the fact that on the next two is just be slightly more fun. But for the stage's lack of general flaws, this will take number 3. I guess the winter stages were just made for 100 points because Cool Mountain is my next choice. With nice 151 point total, there are just a lot of ways to do it. My favorite thing though is of course going on the slide. While not as challenging as Cool Mountain, still it's not a fun to jump any point as possible. It can be fun and up Tall Mountain, I mean, there was traversing the stage. However, Cool Mountain completely fixes that problem. There's a 4-point right at the bottom of the level, all the way up to the top, allowing you to not only skip the slow right back, but also go on through the The only thing I think I would criticize about this is that it's just a bit There are 154 points, is not the most we've seen. However, the stages above this have higher plans of enemies being reflection points too. On top of that, many of the coins in the slide are placed directly next to each other. That's also Mountain had a kind of being quick. I mean, just look at this. All of these coins are just placed in a direct straight line. Alright, you want the main path, but with this stage having such a high point count, we really aren't necessary. It's to that point where I've never actually used it on the stage, so I think difficulty is the only real thing I would change. I'd rather start me to hard. Now this one,
パワーアップ
for that reason, it's good to run around. This is what I fully expected to be number one the second I started this video. Also, this stage was just made for the one. So it's very compact and dense, meaning it's easy to access and explore any area from anywhere on the stage. With a very solid 150 it's a fun one to round out. I'd say this is probably a better starter 100 coin star than Football Battlefield, since you don't ever have to go super far out of your way. Parkouring up to the floating islands is also a lot of fun to do in public.
今の逃げません
And it's a place like that you can get 5 extra points by jumping up. It's not required, probably slower, but it's a nice piece to regardless. The blue coins on the stage are super easy, however I think they should be in this case. This is the first stage to have them after all, and giving the player an easy introduction to the concept makes sense. Plus it's only 20 points as opposed to some of the bigger amounts like
もっと力を
Best way to describe the stars, and it's just real smooth like the wall without slowing down. You take this at pretty much any pace you want, as there's no waiting at all. It's just down to how fast you can.
空よ
Well,
終
no,
わりです行きます
100.
これ終わりに
The entire
大
stage
ダメージです
slower changes at you at all. Just where it's absolutely the number one spot on this sentence.
くそー
Anyways, that's it for this video. Are you a diehard dog fan and hated this ranking? Let me know in the comments. Middle portions of this list were especially hard to put together, especially after this first 5, since I think a lot of them are pretty
頑張れよ
simple.
合理的ですとど
Well,
めです
totally agree.
終わりに
If you enjoyed the video regardless, make sure to leave a like and jam. Last Mario 64 video didn't really perform great, but I'm willing to give the game a second chance, as it is my second favorite Mario game right behind Odyssey. But anyways, try Monster Smash, and I'll see you guys next time.
これで終わりです頑張れよとどめですそれ
Welcome back to Debunking and Rocky Forgotten. This time we'll be taking a look at more topics that have yet to be covered, as well as ones I feel like need more fleshing out. A few months ago, I was finally able to complete the debunking video for the 8th part, Jojolian. Now that that's out of the way, these extras videos have the opportunity to cover topics from Jojolian that I might have missed. The first topic involves Dio. They ask why Dio didn't use his hypnotism again like he did against Jack the Ripper in Part 1. The answer is that he never really stopped doing this. Dio continued using his supernatural powers of charisma to recruit allies in Part 3. However, some people need more convincing than others. Dio's dialogue in the scene with Jack gives us a clue. He mentions that most people have some amount of good in their hearts. This may mean that good people are less susceptible to Dio's hypnosis. We learned later that Kakyoin fell under Dio's charisma when they first met. However, the effects of this are temporary. Abdul was also enamored by Dio's presence when he encountered him in Egypt, but was able to break free and run away. This is the reason Dio used the flesh buds on Kakyoin and Polnareff, which were able to maintain hypnosis in stronger-minded people even from long distances. For others, such as Jack and most of the enemies in Part 3, hypnosis either took complete control or was unnecessary. I'd also imagine that Dio derived some kind of sick satisfaction from controlling people with means other than hypnosis, such as the fear he used to control Whole Horse. Another question is why flesh bugs do not die in sunlight. The simple answer to this is that they do. After Anya's death, we saw her flesh bud disintegrate in the sunlight when it was removed and exposed to it. But what they're most likely asking is why the flesh buds aren't affected while still inside the hosts. In that case, I think the fact that they're obscured underneath the host's hair is enough to shield it from the sun. In the fight against Mariah, Joseph's hands are crushed by the escalator and both of them are seen bleeding. Some ask how this is possible, since one of these hands is actually a prosthetic. The answer is that this isn't blood, but actually the oil used to maintain the prosthetic hand. Joseph's hand is based on the technology of Stroheim's cybernetic body in Part 2. When he was damaged by cars, he also appeared to bleed as well, despite being mechanical. Additionally, in the anime adaptation of Part 3, the oil from Joseph actually colored differently from his blood to reflect this. Over time, I've gotten a ton of comments popping up asking questions related to the visibility of stands. Like how Anne was able to see Strength despite not being a stand user, or how Shinobu was able to see Stray Cat. I honestly just don't understand these kinds of questions. Now, I can understand if someone is asking this about the first couple of visible stands in the series when they're first starting out. But from just naturally going through the story, you would become familiar with the concept of stands that inhabit physical objects. I just have no idea how someone could go all the way through a series that has Strength, Yellow Temperance, Empress, Wheel of Fortune, High Priestess, Get, Gnu, Toth, Anubis, Surface, Love Deluxe, Earth, Wind and Fire, Stray Cat, Superfly, Mr. President, Mike, Notorious Reaction, Oasis, Flintstones, Break House, Velocity, Control, Bills, It's just completely ridiculous. Especially when we have evidence of how friendly Iraqi was with his editor at that time. In fact, if anything, I think that if there were an editor controlling Iraqi's writing, the opposite would be true. In the JoJonium Volume 13 interview, Araki even says that Abdul wasn't that popular of a character. If I were an editor only concerned with what was more popular, I think actually having the fan-favorite character Whole Horse join would be the more likely option. So the idea of Whole Horse getting shot down in favor of Abdul is really unlikely, beyond the fact that we already know the exact reasons for these changes. Now, most normal people would just hear this long list of direct quotes of Araki and accept that their ideas are wrong. But some people are just too stubborn, since as we see here, some would rather say that Araki is lying in interviews to cover up for his mistakes than just accept that they're wrong. I got one question asking why they didn't just restrain Steely Dan in Part 3 to prevent him from injuring himself to hurt Joseph. However, this would do absolutely nothing about the spore growing inside of Joseph's brain, which was going to grow and kill him in the next 10 minutes. The whole reason that they left Jotaro with Steely Dan was to keep him away while they worked to defeat the stand and remove the spore. One question asks why Vanilla Ice became a vampire instead of a zombie, since zombies are created by having a vampire's blood injected into them. This one has a pretty simple answer, since zombies aren't created using vampire's blood. They're created when a person is injected with vampiric essence. Vampires and judges have a separate fluid inside of them that they inject to create zombies. As we saw in Part 1, this was different from blood. Vanilla Ice was revived with the actual blood of a vampire, which is why they became one and not a zombie. Some have asked why at the end of Part 3, Dio was unable to move inside Jotaro's time stop. Earlier, Jotaro was able to move inside of Dio's time stop. This is because moving within someone else's time stop also depletes from your own time-stopping abilities. For example, Jotaro can stop time for a maximum of 5 seconds. If Dio were to stop time for 10 seconds, and Jotaro chose to move within stop time, then he only has those 5 seconds of movement until he's frozen again. What happened at the end of Part 3 was that Dio stopped time for the longest duration that he could to attack Jotaro, but then immediately after the time stop ended, Jotaro stopped time on his own. Since Dio had already used up all his movement, he was now frozen in Jotaro's time stop. Another bunch of questions I've gotten ask about why Jotaro and Dio sometimes say the name of the stand when they stop time, while at other times they don't. I'm really disappointed that I even have to address something like this, since I just have to wonder if people who ask things like this have seen literally any other anime in their life. As if a character saying the name of the attack they're doing isn't just a common trope in any shonen anime ever created, as opposed to some kind of actual requirement for the use of their ability. Same thing applies to whenever I get a question asking how it's possible for Dio to be monologuing during a time stop, as if they think every 5-second long time stop should be accurately represented in real time in the episode. I would think that as a species, we're beyond the why do they scream so much in Dragon Ball school of media criticism. In the last video, I went over why when a person is pierced with the arrow, only certain people can transfer the power of stands to their family members. This is because this only occurs in families that have a strong psychic bond, such as the Joestars, which is why when Koichi was pierced with the arrow, his family members were not affected. However, I got a comment saying that the actual reason was because Koichi was pierced with a regular stand arrow, and not the beetle-decorated stand arrow that was used to awaken Requiem. Now, I've already made a video going over the beetle arrow, and how I think it doesn't actually have any specific power over the normal arrow like a lot of JoJo fans think it does. But regardless, this logic is completely flawed. While it is true that in the Part 6 example of Stand's awakening in family members, this arrow was used, the comment assumes that Dio used the beetle arrow on himself to awaken the Joestar stands. This is completely unfounded, since we have never seen the moment when Dio awakens his stand, which could have occurred with any of the 5 arrows Enya had purchased from Diavolo. Furthermore, Trish is also likely to have awakened her stand through her psychic link to her father, since they're shown to be able to sense each other just like the Joestars do. However, we also have no idea what arrow Diavolo used to awaken King Crimson, let alone when he actually awakened the stand. If it was before he sold the arrows, then there are 6 different ones that could have done it, and if it were after, then he only would have had access to the normal arrow that he later gave to Pulpo. So really, this whole idea of the beetle arrow having any influence over this has no evidence behind it. It simply boils down to whether that person is part of a special family that has a psychic link. For part 4, some asked why Josuke had to punch through Tomoko to remove Aqua Necklace, when it was shown in part 3 that stands can phase through bodies, like when Jotaro pumped Joseph's heart. I don't see how this would apply to this situation at all, since it's not like Jotaro removed Joseph's heart or anything. Aqua Necklace is a physical stand which occupies existing fluid, so if Josuke were to try and remove it without punching through Tomoko, he would have to somehow pick it up with Crazy Diamond's hand and bring it up back through her throat. Josuke obviously wanted Tomoko to not know what was going on, which is why he punched and healed her in one go so she never felt anything. Also, Josuke punched with a broken bottle and then fixed it to trap Aqua Necklace. If he were using this other method, that would not be possible and the stand would simply escape his grasp. This next topic has to do with a question I've gotten a lot over the years, relating to Crazy Diamond. In my Debunking Button Forgotten Part 4 video, I go over why Josuke couldn't repair the button from Kira's jacket to track his location. There I said that because the button was separated from the jacket without any of the connecting thread, it became a separate object and wouldn't be able to be fixed back. Some people have brought up the scene during the harvest fight where Shigechi unscrewed nuts and bolts from the pipe and Josuke was able to use Crazy Diamond to bring them back. They say that the nuts and bolts should be considered separate from the pipe like the button is. Talking about this topic in general means we need to get into the minutiae of Josuke's ability, which is a tricky topic. Essentially, since his ability is to fix things, whether he can do that or not entirely hinges on whether that thing is broken, and the definition of broken is pretty lax at times. I actually consider this to be a flaw with Josuke's ability, since it makes pinning down exactly what he can and cannot do very difficult. For example, time is often a factor in whether something is considered a piece of another. During the final battle, Josuke's blood dried and was now considered a separate object from Josuke himself, but not separate from the rest of the dried blood on Kira's jacket. So it's very possible that the time since the button's removal was enough time for it to be considered separate, and the nuts and bolts fixable since they were only just removed. Like I mentioned earlier, we also need to figure out what exactly constitutes as an object being fixed. In my opinion, the actual state of the object itself counts when it comes to this. The pipe is suspended above ground by the nuts and bolts. In this state, the bolts are an integral part of the state of the object, since without them the pipe would fall. While on the other hand, in my opinion, the button itself isn't integral to the state of the jacket. For these reasons, it's difficult to actually determine any exact answer for when the button is or isn't considered part of the jacket. I'm not even sure at this point if the button is completely unfixable back to its origin. It's a definite possibility that it still is. So I would also like to pose a separate explanation for the button problem since that's where all this arose from. In my original video, I also mentioned another part of the argument, that since the button is so small, it would be extremely difficult to follow back to Kira. As we saw later, even when following his hand, it was difficult for them to keep up with it. Something like the button would be even harder to follow. And not only that, if they did lose track of it, they'd be missing their only clue to Shigechi's death. It's a smarter idea overall to track the origin of the button itself to the tailor, which did lead them straight to Kira with a lot less effort and risk. I got one comment asking what happened to Kira's hand after it left the Cinderella salon during Kira's escape. Well, considering the fact that Kira has two hands for the rest of Part 4, it's pretty easy to figure this one out. Especially considering that the entire purpose of the scene with Kira's hand is that it was fixed by Crazy Diamond and went back to Kira. And as if it wasn't clear enough, the narration explicitly states that Kira still has his original fingerprints on one hand, showing that the hand attached itself to him. Near the end of Part 4, Hayato calls Josuke to come meet him, which results in him discovering Kira's identity and forcing him to deactivate Life Dust. I've gotten some questions asking how Hayato got Josuke's phone number to be able to do this. Well, as we saw in the previous loop, Josuke told Hayato his full name. But how would Hayato be able to get his phone number from this? Well, believe it or not, there used to be this mystical artifact called the phone book, where you can find someone's phone number based on their name. This next question has to do with Part 5. They ask why the Giorno removed the key from the turtle to expose Babyface, that Trish and Bucciarati weren't removed as well since they are living things. However, this is ignoring the properties of Babyface's ability that Trish and Bucciarati were under. His ability is to rearrange living things into inanimate objects. It's even pointed out that Giorno's ability, which is to turn objects into living things, is the exact opposite of Babyface. So since Trish and Bucciarati were in their rearranged state, they weren't really considered alive, and so wouldn't be expelled from the turtle room. This was all directly explained in the scene in question, since while Babyface was in the form of an object, he was still holding onto Giorno's eye, which was alive, which is the reason why he was brought out of the turtle. Some have asked why during the Grateful Dead fight in Part 5 that they didn't pour the cold drinks on themselves to keep cool instead of just using the ice. This is answered in the story itself, since the whole reason they find out about the ability in the first place was because they already drank the drinks, which slowed the aging of some of the team. There's another one related to Part 5, but this technically doesn't have anything to do with Araki. This question is about the JoJo light novel Purple Haze Feedback, which takes place after Part 5 and tells a story with Fugo as the main character. The book has a lot of callbacks to some of the more minor characters in Part 5. For example, the son of the character Pericolo makes an appearance and now works for Giorno. Another of these is that the characters of Sale and Tsukuro both make appearances in the book. However, I've seen a lot of people ask how this is possible, since both characters died during Part 5.
Lol.
Well, as these people are clearly not aware, neither of them died. In Part 5, Bucciarati says that the two are just knocked out and were left in the boat. In Tsukuro's case, this isn't really an issue at all, since despite being decapitated by Sticky Fingers, he was clearly still alive during the torture scene, showing that the zippers don't really count as a wound. And for Sale, while he was shot in the head, Lista remarked at the end of the fight that his stand was still able to stop the bullet right on time, and that he was simply knocked out. Now, obviously, this doesn't really count as an Araki forgotten topic, since Purple Haze Feedback wasn't written by Araki. It was written by Kohei Kodono. But people seem to underestimate Kodono's knowledge of JoJo, when really he has a great eye for the small details. Some have asked why in the Goo Goo Dolls fight, Jolene is able to cover up a camera with her strings, when, as we saw earlier, non-stand users are unable to see her strings. This isn't really an issue in the manga, since no such scene happens. The shot of the camera being covered is a mistake that only is made in the anime. Others ask how Thunder McQueen was able to see and hear Whitesnake, when presumably Whitesnake is a non-visible stand. This question actually has more to it than it seems. First, oddly enough, it's actually somewhat likely that Whitesnake is a visible stand. At first we'd assume it isn't, since they don't draw too much attention to it. But later during the scene in the courtyard, we actually see that Whitesnake needs to retreat when it hears the guards approaching nearby. So it seems that Whitesnake actually is a visible stand. Most likely, he's physically made up of the same melting acid material that is produced by his ability. His early appearances also reflect this, with him appearing to be melting just like the acid. I got one comment asking why Pucci didn't come to Egypt after Dio told him to. Well, he did. It had already been stated in prior flashbacks that he did go to Egypt to meet Dio. In fact, he did it multiple times. Some asked how Pucci and Weather had a strong enough